Untold Assam, the series that brings you the inspiring stories of Assamese living abroad.
I think that everyone has one story, one book in them. Most of us don't write that book, but all of us have that one big story in us. I spent an unimaginable amount of time writing it, 13 years. It's a very long time. It's a long struggle. I don't want to write a book like that ever again. People stop me in the streets and tell me that they're very angry with me because I made them cry, and they're grown men who don't cry. I think all my life I was trying to kind of find that space where I will have the standing to write and people will read. We don't have real life experience of those, right? We have not had food to eat. However, my father probably went through nights without eating, but I didn't. My son will never probably have that, because people do not have the means to express themselves or the time to express themselves or to write or to even know how to write, right?
My guest today is Somnath Batabyal, who calls himself Ohomor Bongal. Somnath is a writer, media studies lecturer at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and a columnist for prominent publications like The Guardian and The Metro. With 3 books to his name, Somnath's work has earned recognition. From breaking cultural boundaries to making waves in industries across the globe, uncovering the untold voices of Assam. Somnath's 3rd book, Red River, has been released, a powerful exploration of the politics of identity and belonging. It transports readers to Assam in the 1980s. The book has received widespread praise, and I had the pleasure of congratulating him on his success.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Harmony, and I'm really delighted you like the book. You are from Guwahati. You grew up around similar times, and it's nice to be able to talk to people who are familiar with the terrain.
The book Red River mostly is set in Assam.
Yeah.
What I understand from the book is that it's about the politics of who belongs where, who doesn't belong, and who decides. Was this story quite important for you to write?
I think that everyone has one story, one book in them. Most of us don't write that book, but all of us have that one big story in us. For me, Red River was that book, and my first novel was very different, but the Red River was the book I was born to write. And I spent an unimaginable amount of time writing it, 13 years, it's a very long time. And it was a big book. It was like 2 times the size of what you read now. It took me 4 years to bring it down to a manageable thing. But it was this story that has haunted me all my life. I grew up in Assam, left Assam, but I kept being, it's been I left Assam in 1991. And for about 15 to 20 years, I didn't go back, but the story remained with me. It grew with me. And here it was. Then once I started writing it, I realized how difficult what a job I had taken up. The history, the politics, we start sometime during the partition, then Bangladesh, 1971 happens, the sectarian violence in Assam, my own story enmeshed in this, and and the characters slowly grew up. It's a long struggle. I don't want to write a book like that ever again. I promise myself from now on, write short, quick novels. Write it within 1 year, 2 years. No more mega epics. This is it. It's done. It takes too much of you, but the rewards are huge. I have been back to Assam several times since the book was written, and the response and the admiration, the understanding of the book, its politics has been so intense, especially from the Assamese community. So be it going back to Don Bosco, where and all my classmates joining in to launch the book, or be it in Cotton College or Guwahati University, and the public intellectuals. It's just been overwhelming. That I have had people stop me in the streets and tell me that they're very angry with me because I made them cry, and they're grown men who don't cry. And people who said, I've grown up in Tezpur, but it's my story. I've grown up in Sibsagar, but it's my story. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you say people are angry because you made them cry. I had those moments as well. And you only think that, why did I know all of these things when I was growing up, right? You have also spoken about Bangladesh, and I think your dad was born in Dhaka, and then he had to shift his base when he was very young. I think he was 6 years old. And then he moved to Assam. You grew up in Assam. You have also said that you have lived through the entire Bongal Kheda movement as well. I mean, this book raises so many questions, right, about separatism, about nationalism. You have also said that a migrant lives in many spaces. They live in nostalgia. They want this wish to belong and to fit in. And a migrant's happiness depends on how much you can mask. Is that how?
Yes.
Is that how you would like to sum up the feelings of a migrant?
I don't think there's a summing up. You cannot encompass it very quickly. But these are, you are a migrant yourself, and you would understand. Most of us live in two different places at the same time, right? Or in multiple places. As far as I'm concerned, I live in spaces where my father talks about an imagined Dhaka. That Dhaka is no more in existence, but that is what he spoke to me about. I live in that. I live in the imagined spaces of Assam, where I always thought I would grow up and die. I never thought I would leave Assam. It just happened. I live in spaces which I have never lived in, like the Calcutta of my fathers in the 70s and the 60s. So these are all imagined spaces. Even now, I could listen to a Bhupen Hazarika song and find myself transported to Guwahati. Being with my friends, sitting by the Brahmaputra, which was my favorite space, drinking tea, stolen cigarettes, all of those stories. And I think as a migrant, I find the sadness is that you can't translate it for your son, for your daughter, for the next generation. How wonderful it was to live without television, without phones and all the gizmos, but we still managed a very active, beautiful life. My son is always surprised at all my stories. That can't happen. The fact that we are caned regularly in school. He just can't believe that kind of corporal punishment could exist. And I tell him that, I'm still quite fond of my teachers and the school itself, right? Though they changed my lifelines by repeated canings. But also the fact that you mentioned of being an outsider, being a Bongal. I'm still friends with my Assamese friends. We still go back. We still, meet for conversations. And what I wanted to impress through the book was that it doesn't matter whether you're Bengali, Assamese, Manipuri, Khasi, whatever you are, you can always be an outsider depending on context. The Assamese feels like an outsider the moment you come to Delhi or beyond, So, and that's what I keep saying, that if you make somebody feel like that, trust me, when you go out, you'll feel the same. The politics keep changing. The centers and peripheries keep changing.
You have, like I said before, you have really raised bigger questions, like, about belonging, about identity, about nationalism. But the book is really about hope. It's because about three boys, right, growing up in Guwahati. It's about friendship. It's about, you have spoken so much about cricket, how a sport can unite everybody, how people find ways to have fun in times of violence. So it's all about that. And because you have spoken about school, there was this character, MC John, the head teacher of these boys, the school they go to. You have already mentioned you have done your schooling from Don Bosco.
Yes.
This character, MC John, how much is that character influenced by your real teacher from Don Bosco?
Not very much, it's an amalgamation of ideas. So I don't want to. In a sense, there are no real life characters. All the characters are built in from many influences, and I guess the reaction to the headmaster was universal. How kids reacted to symbols of authority, and here Father MC George turns out to be a wonderful human being, right? From his slightly misogynistic politics to where he evolves and comes out. So there are, of course, resemblances and based on certain stuff, yeah, but it's not a caricature or an exact replica or a representation of one person. I hadn't been in Assam for about, as I said, for about 20 years, so I had not forgotten, it was difficult for me to only rely on memory. So I had to go back to get the cadence of the language again. There is a lot of, though it's a book written in English, but there's so much of the cadence of Assamese in it, and also Bengali. And you had to get that back in the writing. And also the lives and the livelihoods and the tempo. So I went back to Assam and I stayed almost for a year, in Assam, before I started really seriously writing, just to feel the rhythms of that, of the people I was writing.
So when you stayed in Assam for a year, and I'm sure you traveled extensively, what did you learn about people? What do people crave the most? What makes them try?
It was a fascinating time, I first went to Guwahati, and the Guwahati. So the Guwahati I grew up in had vanished. This is an absolutely new city, right? People talk a different language. There was I couldn't find anything I could write about, because this is a period piece. This is not the Guwahati of today I was writing about. So I then decided that I have to find a place which resembles Guwahati of the late 80s and early 90s. So I went to Golaghat. And I kept coming back to Golaghat. Golaghat is a highway town, situated between highways, but it has a very old world charm about it. And people know each other, the meat seller will come in the morning, the coconut guy will come. So there's this old thing which still carried on. So when from Golaghat, first went there, then I got married. My wife was pregnant. I brought her to Golaghat. We lived there in a small place. I brought a little plot of land in a village near Golaghat in a tea garden. God knows what has happened to it. I've not gone back. So built a bamboo hut, lived with the villagers there, just to figure out, the last part of the book is going back to that Assamese village. So much of work on the tea gardens that I did to understand the small tea growers movement in Assam, how it came about. What do people want? There's this old lady who spoke to me. And we were talking about ambition, success, and he said, Somnath, I have fish in the pond, I have betel nut in the tree. I have rice in the fields. What do I want? I want nothing. If I have these three things, there is nothing to need. And that really woke me up to a very different rhythm of life. That it's okay to be, you don't need to want the world, because you never get the world anyway. This kind of contentment which came about was just wonderful. And this you only find in an Assam which is from a different time. Not in today's Guwahati, you won't find that. Right? Not in today's Jorhat, you won't find that.
Yes.
Everything is moving at a frenetic pace, right?
That's true. So what did you do? Like after your Don Bosco, you said you were in Cotton College, then I think
this is the fun part here, Mani. So I was a very poor student. I didn't get my admission in Cotton College. I lost it I didn't make it by 1 percentage point. So when Cotton College now invited me to give a talk, the Department of English, I was delighted. I said, this is the way the prodigal son returns. You invite me to give a talk. So it's just fun. Anyway, so I finished Don Bosco and I went to Arjo Vidyapit for all my shame for my 11th and 12th exams. And then I was so disappointed in myself in a way that I went off to Delhi, to Hansraj College. I was also a badminton player, so I had a pretty decent, I was not a great player, but I was fairly good to get a sports quota admission.
Oh, yes.
In Hansraj. And then I topped the university in all 3 years. I suddenly became a very good student. And after that, I just went into journalism. I became a journalist. I worked with Asian Age, Pioneer, Hindustan Times, NDTV, The Week.
Oh.
So I became a seasoned journalist for about 10 years. And then I got a bit bored and skeptical of the way Indian journalism, the route that television journalism was going at least. And then I left. I came to the UK, did a master's, did a PhD here in London. Then I went for a postdoc in Germany for 3 years, in Heidelberg, which was a really wonderful experience. And then at SOAS. So, kind of a lot of things.
Okay, so sounds like nothing was planned as such. Things just happened and fell into place.
I think the only thing I wanted to do through my entire life is to be able to write, and have writing is so much about courage. You think that you'll put in so many man hours, and man hours is the wrong word, person hours, and no one might read it, right? So that is the how do you summon up the courage to be able to devote 13 years? And, it's the monetary compensation is hardly there in writing anymore. Unless you're really big, less than a percentage of authors can make it just by writing. So I think all my life I was trying to kind of find that space where I will have the standing to write and people will read. And I'm slowly getting there and finding an audience and being appreciated. This has been the kind of revealing factor, that yes, if I write a book, people read.
And you have said it's courage. Of course, it is courage, but also giving up a lot of things, because when you have a job, when you have a family, you are writing, you have to give up on many other things. And 13 years is a long, long time.
Too long. No one should write a book like this. That long. It shouldn't. It's just, some of it is, of course, circumstances. You have a young family, you have a job, you need to survive. Dedicated writers will do anything to fund that. I had to find a way to fund my life and my family and keep them, clothed and fed. So that was difficult. And this is why, in one sense, writing, I always find that writing is a very, you have to be comfortable to write. There's no, the stories of, people struggling, not being able to eat, and writing is over. You cannot survive in a hyper-capitalist world like ours and write with no money.
Yes.
And I think we lose a lot of writers, and because there are just no means to keep them going. Everyone expects writers to have a job and then do this on the side.
That's true. Yeah, it's never a full-time job.
Very difficult.
I mean, you have
Unless
to have,
commercially writing, unless you're writing film scripts or ads or TV series, there is an avenue for that, which I'm just not very interested in. That's just not my.
yeah. Also because you don't have the freedom as a writer when you do an ad or a script writing.
I mean,
It
it's
has
just a way to keep your,
kitchen running.
kitchen running. That's basically it, right? So so finding a space where you have time enough to think, to be in the libraries, to leisure time, and leisure is only for people who are well off. That is my problem there with writing, is that I'm not from a well off family. I come from very modest means. So all my so writing is generally for the rich.
Being a writer is a middle class profession. Is that what you're trying to say?
Writing is a middle class profession, yes. And this is the worst. No, not the worst. This is the sad part about this profession, that we want to write about. Our concerns are so many as writers. We've come here to write because we feel that we have things to say, and much of it is about other communities, marginalized communities, poor people, and rich people, and all of that. But we don't have real life experience of those, right? We have not had food to eat. However, my father probably went through nights without eating, but I didn't. My son will never probably have that, But we want to write about people, hunger pangs, maybe. We want to write about being ostracized as communities. And the only way we do that is through observation, perhaps, which is, ethnography, research, reading, but there's no experience of it.
Yeah.
But that is one. The other is, imagine, the amount of stories we lose every day because people do not have the means to express themselves or the time to express themselves or to write or to even know how to write, right? Yeah. Yes. So that is, I think, a big loss to storytelling and stories.
Now, because we're talking about, about hunger that, probably your son will never even see. It's difficult to even... I know. Is it difficult to write sitting here in the UK? Because, if you see your surroundings, it lacks variety. You see similar things. You see not many surprises, not many shocking incidents or not many characters. Does that actually, that means lack of material to create stories? Do you ever feel like that sitting here in the UK?
I mean, I think I will disagree in the sense that everything is uniform and not exciting in the UK or anywhere. I think everywhere is exciting if you know how to look. I might not have the eyes to look for those storytelling material in the UK, or perhaps I didn't have the eyes. Now that my next book is situated in London very much, I see wonderful things happening. So perhaps the difficulty in writing Red River was that sitting in London, I had to write about a very different tropical terrain, right? In the cold December morning, writing about a hot July or August or monsoons in a tea garden is, you don't have. So, I mean, I went back often. That's why. I got my lot of material in and tried to write. But yes, I think I wrote my best chapters when I sat in Assam and wrote.
So while I was reading this book, it's a big book, obviously. And for me, at least, when you start something at the beginning, I think that looks like the most challenging because you roughly know what you want to write about, but you don't know how to get there, you don't have enough, and you also don't know where it will end. How do you go from nothing to creating a book of 500-600 pages? What is that process? How does that look like?
Now that I'm trying to start the next novel, I wish I knew. Because I'm like really struggling to what is that first line? Where does the story start? I know the story, but I just can't start it. But I'll tell you about Red River. Red River, in a sense, is a critique of the nation state. And not necessarily India, but the institution of the state itself. So I have 3 stories, if you see there at the start, almost like a prologue, where you have the refugee, the migrant character, Lucky and her family. The migrant who wants to belong to the nation state, but is always pushed away. Then you have the believer, the army man, who believes in the sanctity of the nation state, right? And the third, you have the rebel, who wants to tear away from the fabric of the nation state. So this was my theoretical almost formula, which I wanted to start with, right? Here is the nation state. Here are the 3 different components. And then I had the stories. I mean, of course, you can't write in a novel, you can't have theory. So I started with that point of these 3 different components of the nation state. And then the stories followed. And ultimately for me, this is a story about identity, and nation state is that biggest signifier of identity. Where are you from? And it doesn't have to be nation state as in India. It can be a home.
Sure.
And that's the Assamese identity is what I was playing with mostly in this. And who is allowed to belong, who is not allowed to belong, and how we decide that. And these are all forces of history. There's nothing like that.
Because it is so much about, you said, politics of identity and then belonging. Have you figured out while you're writing what this feeling must be like when somebody feels the sense of belonging or not having the sense of belonging? And it doesn't have to be just for migrants, but it can be to a community, culture, even within family. You may not feel you belong. Have you figured out through this journey of Red River what that feeling feels like?
I mean, I think, growing up, almost every child wants to belong. You see the conformity in schools, you want to be part of the crowd, right? All the exceptional things about children go away in schools because they make you the same block, right? Same exams, same ambitions, same professions, all the creativity. I wish I never went to a school. I wish my child never went to a school, all our education system is designed to make you feel part of everybody else, and individual talents vanish. You're also more comfortable. You're not marked out. Physical deformities come easily. And I was a fat kid, so I used to be called Petla. Immediately you're marked out, right? If you're tall, you'll be, another name. If you're short, if you're dark, whatever you could call it, right? And as kids, we want to avoid it. I think being alone, being lonely, being solitary, always kind of people have negative things to say about it. Mm-hmm. And I somehow I don't think that's correct, because I have grown very comfortable in being an outsider, just sitting on the fence and being able to observe and not having to necessarily jump in. I'm not the life and soul of any party. I don't do, easy conversations, casual conversations, it doesn't work for me. So I sit on fences. I like sitting on fences. I like not being framed or being predictable. So I think, and it also allows for thinking time. So I don't think people who don't belong necessarily it's a negative. A lot of us don't belong. No? A lot of us feel our accents are different, or we look different from people. And diversity we want to encourage diversity, but our actions don't. The way we make people feel and think, and if you're gay, you're this, you're that. I wish it wasn't so. It doesn't make anyone feel happy. But for those who feel like the outsider, like Samar definitely did throughout his childhood, it's not all bad. There's a beauty in being solitary. You don't have to be lonely. You can be solitary.
The book says Red River carries all our stories. If you listen wherever you are, you will hear them. What would you take readers to take away from Red River?
Hope, reconciliation, and hopefully a lot of joy. That's and the ability to listen to stories and to tell our stories. We all have stories to tell. One of the things I mentioned in the book, and my father used to tell me. My father was an atheist, and I asked him once about rebirth. If you're an atheist, do you believe in rebirth? He said, rebirth is nothing but telling our stories. I tell you my stories, and you will carry them and tell it to your son. And when you tell it to your son, I am reborn. I sit like my father, I walk like my father, and I see that in my son. Tradition and stories are where we keep our identities alive, and pass it on to the next generation. So I would like people, if anything, I'd like just people to hear stories, more stories, and stories from different people, different writers, and be able to tell their own stories. Like the Red River, we all carry them.
Wonderful. It's been so wonderful. And thank you for this conversation. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing and reading your future work.